In World War II, exposure killed as efficiently as enemy fire. Soldiers on forced marches, air crews down behind lines, civilians displaced by bombing, and resistance units hiding in ruined buildings all faced the same problem. Shelter materials were scarce, time was shorter, and weather showed no mercy. Out of this pressure came a surprisingly effective solution that appears repeatedly in field manuals, memoirs, and after-action reports: the blanket wall. It was not a tent, not a bunker, and not a permanent structure. Yet it created warmth, wind protection, and concealment using nothing more than layered fabric and intelligent placement. Why blankets became a structural material during the war? Blankets were everywhere. Every army issued them. Civilians owned them. They survived rain better than paper, folded smaller than tarps, and did not attract attention. More importantly, blankets trapped air. Air, when immobilized, is insulation. World War II engineers and experienced troops understood that stopping wind mattered more than thick walls. Blankets became walls because, at their core, walls are really just barriers, not about thickness at all. So, how was the blanket wall actually constructed? Well, the method was simple, but honestly quite precise. Blankets were hung vertically, not just draped loosely. The bottom edge was weighted with soil, stones, or even equipment to keep the wind from curling underneath. And, you see, the top edge was angled slightly inward to reduce convection. When possible, multiple layers were used with air gaps between them. This honestly mattered more than fabric thickness. 2 blankets separated by a few inches trapped more heat than one heavy layer. Why layering mattered more than material? Wool blankets were ideal, but cotton and mixed fibres worked too. The real insulation came from trapped air pockets. Rain was shed rather than absorbed when the outer layer was angled correctly. In ruined buildings, blanket walls were hung inside doorways or shattered windows. This turned cold stone shells into livable spaces without altering the structure. How soldiers oriented blanket walls for maximum effect. Orientation was deliberate. Walls were placed perpendicular to prevailing wind, never parallel. Even a partial barrier reduced wind chill drastically. In open terrain, U-shaped configurations created dead air zones. In forests, blankets were combined with natural windbreaks like fallen logs or embankments. This strategic placement allowed small shelters to feel dramatically warmer than the surrounding environment. So, why did this wall work even without fire? Well, fire, you see, attracted attention. It consumed precious fuel and, of course, produced smoke. The blanket wall wasn't just a one-trick pony. Different groups found their own ways to use it. Infantry units would set it up during halts and at night positions. Air crews, after bailing out, sometimes hung blankets from parachute lines for shelter. Civilians, in their bombed-out homes, used it to seal off just one room, rather than trying to heat an entire building. And resistance fighters, well, they used it to create hidden interior spaces that could be dismantled in just a few minutes. Its real strength, honestly, was adaptability. The same materials could serve all sorts of roles. Now, how can modern survivalists use this method today? The principle really hasn't changed. Whether you're in an emergency shelter, a vehicle, a cabin, or out at camp, you should always prioritize wind control before worrying about how thick your insulation is. Sure, modern materials like moving blankets, sleeping bags and tarps can do the trick, but the real World War II lesson here is about technique, not just the gear. So, why did this method outperform those makeshift huts? Well, many improvised shelters failed simply because they focused too much on overhead cover rather than worrying about lateral exposure. You see, wind strips heat away much faster than cold air alone ever could. The blanket wall, quite cleverly, addressed the real enemy directly. By reducing the airflow, it allowed the body's own heat to, accumulate rather than just escape into the night. So, why did this knowledge fade away after the war? Well, after the conflict, post-war housing, central heating and synthetic insulation sort of replaced those old fabric-based solutions. Emergency shelter skills were relegated to manuals that, honestly, very few people ever bothered to read. But, the physics never changed. Wind still steals heat, and air still insulates when it's trapped. The blanket wall vanished from daily life, not because it failed, but simply because folks stopped needing it. But here's the thing. This World War II shelter still matters today. In disasters, power outages, vehicle breakdowns, and situations where people are displaced, this method remains, really, one of the fastest ways to create survivable conditions with hardly any tools at all. It requires no cutting, no digging, and no permanent alteration. The World War II blanket wall, you see, wasn't clever because it was complicated. It was effective because it understood heat loss at its most basic level. If this deep look into wartime survival engineering added real value to your understanding of practical history, please support Backyard Wisdom by subscribing, sharing this episode, and helping keep proven knowledge alive for those who may need it when modern systems fall away.